My name is Eleanor Vance, I'm 78 years old, and I found my grandson and his baby daughter freezing under a freeway, 30 years after my own son destroyed our family. Before I tell you how this moment led to a confrontation I never thought I'd have, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The Arizona monsoon was throwing a tantrum. Rain hammered the roof of the Lincoln, a relentless drum solo against the black metal, and the wind howled like a hungry animal. The wipers fought a losing battle against the sheets of water plastering the windshield. Inside, the heated leather seats and the soft cashmere of my coat felt like a world away from the chaos outside. Felt like a betrayal. "Here, ma'am." Thomas, my driver for over a decade, spoke for the first time in an hour. His voice was laced with a concern he was too professional to show on his face. He slowed the car to a crawl, its tires hissing on the slick asphalt. Through the smeared glass I could see it. The freeway overpass. A hulking concrete skeleton against a bruised purple sky. And underneath it, a tiny flickering light. "Stop here, Thomas," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Keep the engine running." He didn't question me. He never did. The moment I opened the heavy car door, the storm lunged at me. The sound was deafening. A roar of wind, water, and the constant thunder of 18-wheelers passing overhead, their tires spraying a fine mist of road grime. The air smelled of wet concrete, and a particular kind of sour despair I remembered from my childhood. My expensive, sensible shoes sank immediately into the thick mud. I didn't care. I opened my umbrella, a flimsy shield against the deluge, and began to walk. Each step was a squelch, the cold water splashing against my ankles. Under the overpass, the world was a collection of shadows and refuse. Fast food wrappers, a tipped-over shopping cart, the glint of broken glass. And there, huddled against a massive concrete pillar, was a small, pathetic tent. Its thin fabric shuddered with every gust of wind. Then I heard it. A cry. Not the angry wail of a healthy baby demanding attention, but a weak, exhausted whimper that was almost swallowed by the storm. It was a sound of pure misery. It cut through me sharper than the cold. My pace quickened. The tent flap was partially open. I stopped just outside, my heart pounding against my ribs. Inside, a young man was on his knees, his back to me. His shoulders were hunched, the knobs of his spine visible through a threadbare, soaked t-shirt. He was rocking back and forth, trying to soothe a small bundle in his arms. The full weight of the moment hit me. This wasn't a grainy photograph in a private investigator's report anymore. This was my blood. My family. I took a deep breath. Leo Vance. He whipped around so fast I thought he might pull a muscle. His eyes were wide with animal fear, one arm tightening protectively around the bundle. His face, oh God, his face. Beneath the grime and the scruff of a beard, his cheekbones were sharp angles under his skin. But his eyes, they were my Arthur's eyes. The same deep brown, the same shape. Right now, they were filled with suspicion and exhaustion. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice a raw rasp. "Get away from us." The baby in his arms, wrapped in what looked like a man's faded denim jacket, let out another pitiful cry. Her face was flushed a dangerous red, her dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, despite the bone-chilling cold. I could feel the feverish heat coming off her even from a foot away. Ignoring his demand, I took a step closer and crouched down, bringing myself to his level. The mud soaked through the knees of my slacks. I didn't even notice. "She has a fever," I said, my voice soft but firm. "She's burning up." "You think I don't know that?" he shot back, frustration and terror warring in his eyes. "What do you want?" "We don't have anything to steal." "I'm not here to take anything, Leo," I said, holding his gaze. The rain was starting to drip from my umbrella onto my shoulders, but I didn't move. I had to get this right. Everything depended on it. He flinched when I used his name again. Confusion clouded his face. "How do you know my name?" This was it. The moment that would either save us or break us completely. "My name is Eleanor Vance," I said, my voice clear and steady over the storm's roar. "I know your father told you I was dead, but I am your grandmother." He just stared at me. The protective anger in his eyes dissolved, replaced by a profound, hollow shock. He shook his head slowly, a denial that had no strength behind it. The world seemed to stop, the sound of the rain and the trucks overhead fading into a dull hum. It was just the two of us, a ghost and a lost boy kneeling in the mud. That's not possible, he stammered, his voice cracking. My grandparents are dead. Both sides. My father. He swallowed hard, the lie he'd been told his entire life catching in his throat like a shard of glass. He told me you died 30 years ago. I looked into my husband's eyes, set in the face of this broken young man, and saw 30 years of pain, 30 years of lies, 30 years of a stolen family. I took a breath, the cold, damp air filling my lungs. I leaned in, ready to shatter the foundation of his entire life with the truth. Before I could answer him, before I could begin to chip away at the mountain of lies his father had built around him, you need to understand the cold, hard truth of why I was kneeling in the mud in a Phoenix monsoon in the first place. You need to understand the betrayal that started it all. Let's go back 3 weeks. Picture me in my penthouse. It's a place of polished white marble and floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the endless sprawl of Houston. It's beautiful, I suppose, but for 30 years it's been a beautiful, empty cage. That morning, like every morning, I was going through the motions. The coffee was black, the silence was absolute, and a single black folder sat on my mahogany desk, mocking me. My assistant, Margaret, a woman of impeccable discretion, had placed it there 3 days prior. She knew better than to mention its contents. It was thin, unassuming, but it felt as heavy as a tombstone. I had spent 3 days pushing papers around it, making calls, pretending it wasn't the only thing in the room. But I was done pretending. The ghost of my husband, Arthur, wouldn't let me rest. With a hand that was surprisingly steady, I opened it. The private investigator I'd hired was the son of the man I'd used 30 years ago. Less thorough than his father, perhaps, but discreet. And the Vance name, even in my semi-retirement, still opened doors. The report inside was cold, clinical, and utterly devastating. 6 pages of black and white text that methodically outlined the complete and total destruction of a young man's life. My grandson's life. Name, Leo Vance. Age 28. Marital status, divorced. Ex-spouse Olivia Whitman has remarried. Divorce cited as due to financial stress and irreconcilable differences. Employment. 5 years at Midwest Manufacturing. Position terminated 4 months ago due to plant downsizing. No subsequent employment found. Financials. Bank account overdrawn. Multiple collection notices. Vehicle repossessed 2 months ago. Last known address. The Oasis Palms apartment complex, Mesa, Arizona. Evicted for non-payment of rent 6 weeks ago. Current status. Unhoused. Dependents. Daughter Lily Vance. Age 16 months. Each line was a hammer blow. I could picture it all so clearly. The humiliation of the termination, the heartbreak of the divorce, the shame of the eviction notice taped to his door. Then I got to the final section. The part that made the air leave my lungs. Recent activities. Subject was observed attempting to secure space at the Maricopa Family Shelter. All family units were full. Subject was placed on a 3-month waiting list. Phone records, obtained legally through a subpoena related to a debt collection case, show a single outgoing call on the evening of his eviction. The call was placed to a number registered to Robert and Cynthia Vance in Seattle, Washington. The call lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds. The report concluded with a final chilling line. Follow-up inquiries with a source close to the Vance family in Seattle indicate that the subject's request for temporary housing was denied. Denied. The word echoed in the silent room. Denied. It wasn't just a word, it was a verdict. A death sentence handed down by a father to his son. And it threw me back through time, to a day I had tried to bury for 3 decades. The memory was so vivid it was like walking through a door into the past. Our beautiful home, the one Arthur had designed and helped build, was silent. It was a heavy, unnatural silence. Arthur's car was in the garage, but he hadn't answered when I called his name. I found him in his study. He wasn't reading. He wasn't on the phone. He was just sitting in his big leather chair, the one with the worn arms, staring at the wall. The door to the built-in safe, which had been hidden behind a painting of the Texas bluebonnets, was wide open. It was a black gaping maw. Empty. Arthur? What is it? What's wrong? I asked, my heart starting to pound. He didn't turn. He just kept staring at the empty safe. He took it all, Eleanor, he said. His voice was flat, hollowed out. It was the voice of a man who had already died and just hadn't told his body yet. I just got off the phone with the bank. Robert cleaned us out this morning. What are you talking about? I rushed to his side. That's not possible. He had power of attorney. I gave it to him last year to handle that commercial property deal. I trusted him. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were full of a terrible, shattered confusion. The company accounts, our personal savings, the bonds for our grandchildren's college fund, even the inheritance your father left you. It's all gone. He transferred it to an offshore account and disappeared. For the next hour, I was a whirlwind of frantic denial, calling our lawyer, our accountant, Robert's number again and again. Nothing. It was all true. When I finally came back into the study, breathless and terrified, the color of Arthur's face had changed. It was a pale waxy gray like old paper. His left hand was clutching his chest, his right hand reaching for me. His mouth opening but no words coming out. I screamed his name. I fumbled for the phone. But it was too late. He was gone before the paramedics even arrived. The official cause of death was a massive coronary. The doctor said there was nothing anyone could have done. But I knew better. Arthur Vance, the strongest, kindest man I had ever known, died of a broken heart. He was murdered by his own son as surely as if Robert had held a gun to his chest. And now, 30 years later, that same son had denied his own child a roof over his head. Some poisons don't dilute over time. They only become more potent. The grief I had carried for 30 years suddenly crystallized into a cold, hard rage. It was a purpose. I closed the folder with a soft thud. I picked up my desk phone. My hand did not shake. Margaret, I said, my voice like ice. Prepare the jet. I'm going to Arizona. Now. The wind under the overpass was a physical force, shoving against me, trying to steal the air from my lungs. Leo's face was a pale blur in the gloom, his eyes wide with a disbelief so profound it was almost madness. You're dead, he whispered, the words ragged. I saw it. He showed me a death certificate. It had your name on it. Eleanor May Vance. A forgery. The thought was sickening but not surprising. My son was nothing if not thorough in his cruelty. But dissecting Robert's web of lies would have to wait. Lily let out another cough, a dry, rattling sound that scraped at my soul. It was the sound of a baby's lungs giving up. There is a time for ghosts and a time for doctors, Leo, I said, my voice cutting through the storm's roar. We can talk about your father's lies all night, but right now, every minute we sit here in this filth, your daughter gets sicker. I rose to my feet, my joints protesting the cold and damp. I held out my hand. It was a wrinkled, age-spotted hand, but it was steady. I don't care if you think I'm a ghost or a devil. I have a warm, dry car waiting. I can have a pediatrician looking at your daughter in less than an hour. What I'm offering you is a choice. Pride or your daughter's life. Choose. It was brutal, but it had to be. I watched the war play out on his face. He looked down at the tiny, feverish child in his arms, her little body shuddering with each breath. He looked at the flimsy, collapsing tent. He looked at the puddle of muddy water creeping towards his knees. Then he looked back at me, at the strange woman who claimed to be his dead grandmother. And in his eyes, the last bit of his pride finally shattered. He gave a single jerky nod. Getting him to the car was like trying to help a wounded deer. He was unsteady on his feet, weak from days of hunger and shivering with a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. He clutched Lily in one arm and his threadbare backpack in the other, stubbornly refusing to let me carry anything. He was a father, and he would carry his own child. I respected that. Thomas, my driver, had the back door open before we even reached the car. He didn't so much as blink at the sight of the soaked, mud-streaked man and his sick baby. He simply held the door, his face a mask of professional calm. The moment Leo slid onto the plush, heated leather seat, he let out a shuddering sigh. It was the sound of a man who had been holding his breath for months. He closed his eyes, his head falling back against the headrest, and for just a second, the hard shell of the street-weary survivor cracked, revealing the terrified young man underneath. The Biltmore Children's Clinic, I told Thomas. And step on it. It was a private, 24-hour urgent care I knew of, a place of quiet competence, not the fluorescent chaos of a public ER. As the big car glided away from the curb, I looked back. The tent, our umbrella, the whole miserable scene was swallowed by the rain and darkness. It was as if it had never existed. At the clinic, a nurse whisked Lily from Leo's arms before he could protest. A top pediatrician, a woman with kind eyes and an air of no-nonsense authority, saw us within minutes. I could see Leo vibrating with tension in the corner of the sterile examination room, watching the doctor's every move, ready to fight the world for his daughter. Acute pneumonia, Dr. Adams said, her voice grave as she listened to Lily's chest. Her oxygen levels are low. You got her here just in time, Mr. Vance. Another 24 hours in those conditions. She let the sentence hang in the air, a terrible, unspoken truth. They gave Lily a shot of powerful antibiotics and put her on a nebulizer. Within half an hour, the desperate, rattling edge to her breathing began to ease. The color started to return to her cheeks. I watched Leo watch his daughter, and I saw the tension slowly drain from his shoulders, replaced by an exhaustion so profound he could barely stand. On the silent drive to the private airfield, Lily was asleep in a borrowed car seat, breathing peacefully for the first time in days. Leo sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window. Stay with me here because this next part is important. It's where everything started to shift. In the quiet darkness of the car, surrounded by the scent of clean leather and the soft hum of the engine, he finally turned to me. The fight was gone. The suspicion was gone. All that was left was a raw, aching vulnerability. Why? He asked, his voice so quiet I could barely hear it. My own father. He wouldn't even let us sleep on his couch. Why would you, a stranger, a ghost, do all this? I met his gaze in the dim light. I thought of Arthur. I thought of 30 years of stolen time. I thought of the tiny baby breathing in the back seat. Because your father may have forgotten what family means, Leo, I said, my voice thick with an emotion I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. But I have not. He turned back to the window, but not before I saw a single tear trace a clean path through the grime on his cheek. It was a beginning. A fragile, terrifying, beautiful beginning. He was a drowning man who had just been thrown a lifeline. But I knew the real sharks were my own son, and they were already circling, waiting for the scent of blood in the water. The Gulf Stream jet cut through the night sky, a silver needle stitching the darkness between Arizona and Texas. Leo slept a dead, dreamless sleep in one of the plush reclining seats, the kind of sleep that only comes after a long period of terror. Lily was safe in a skycot, tended to by the flight attendant, her tiny chest rising and falling in a steady, healthy rhythm. I didn't sleep. I sat with a cup of tea I didn't drink, and I watched over my family, a word I hadn't used in a very long time. We landed in Houston as the sun was beginning to bleed across the horizon. The drive to the estate was quiet. Leo stared out the window, his face a mixture of awe and apprehension as we passed through the grand iron gates and up the long, oak-lined drive. When the main house came into view, its white columns looking like ancient sentinels in the dawn light, he let out a low whistle. This is a house? He asked, his voice rough with sleep. I thought it was a hotel. Your grandfather built every inch of it, I said softly. He said a man's home should be his fortress. I saw the walls go up in his eyes again. This kind of wealth wasn't just foreign to him. It was a threat. It was the world of the father who had abandoned him. He probably thought this was just a gilded cage, and that I, the mysterious ghost grandmother, was the keeper. I made a decision then. I wouldn't overwhelm him. I let him pass the soaring marble entryway, past the grand staircase and the ballroom. I took him to a quiet, self-contained suite of rooms in the east wing. It was comfortable, furnished with solid, simple furniture, with windows that looked out over the gardens instead of the imposing front drive. The nursery I had prepared was connected, and Maria, the retired nurse, was already there, her presence calm and reassuring. This is your space, Leo, I said, handing him a heavy brass key. It locks from the inside. Your privacy will be respected. Maria is here to help you, not to replace you. You are this little girl's father. That is paramount. He took the key, his fingers brushing mine. For a moment, he just looked at me. Thank you, he whispered. It was the first time he had thanked me. The first few days were quiet. He was like a phantom in the house, a ghost learning to walk in the land of the living. I'd catch glimpses of him walking with Lily in the garden, or hear his soft voice through the nursery monitor as he sang her a wordless lullaby. He ate the meals that were left for him, and slowly, the sharp angles of his face began to soften. The dark, hunted look in his eyes started to recede. On the fourth evening he found me in the library. It was Arthur's favorite room, walled with floor-to-ceiling books, the air thick with the scent of old paper and leather. I was sitting in Arthur's reading chair, an old photo album open on my lap. He hesitated in the doorway. "Am I interrupting?" "Not at all," I said, gesturing to the chair opposite mine. "Come in." He sat, his large frame looking awkward in the formal chair. We were quiet for a moment, the only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. "I wanted to show you something," I said, sliding the heavy album across the small table between us. He opened it. The pages were filled with old black and white photos. A young, smiling Arthur covered in sawdust. A row of modest, identical houses. Arthur and a much younger me, laughing, standing in front of a tiny office with a sign that read, Vance Homes. "Your grandfather didn't come from money, Leo," I said softly. "He came from red Georgia clay and calloused hands. His father taught him how to build, and he came to Texas with nothing but a toolbox and a belief that every family deserved a safe, solid roof over their head. Those little houses, those were the first Vance homes. He built them for veterans coming home from the war, sold them at cost." Leo stared at a picture of Arthur grinning, holding up a set of keys to a young couple holding a baby. "He looks proud." "He was," I said. "He never built a single house he wouldn't have lived in himself. He used to say that integrity was the only foundation that would never crack." I paused, then looked Leo in the eye. "Your father, Robert, he never understood that. He only ever saw the houses as assets, the families as numbers on a balance sheet. He saw the name, but he never understood the legacy." Leo closed the album gently. He looked around the magnificent, book-lined room, at the legacy Arthur had built. Then he looked at me. "My whole life," he said, his voice thick with a dawning, painful understanding. "I thought I came from nothing. From a man who didn't want me." "You come from him," I said, tapping the cover of the album. "You come from Arthur Vance. Don't you ever forget that." He fell asleep that night in a real bed, Lily breathing peacefully in her crib, and for the first time in 3 decades, the house didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like a home waiting to be reclaimed. Little did I know the fight for it was about to truly begin, and my enemy was my own flesh and blood. The next month was a period of quiet healing. The color returned to Leo's face, and the hunted look in his eyes was replaced by a calm watchfulness. Lily blossomed. She was a happy, curious baby, fascinated by the squirrels in the garden and the feel of the thick grass beneath her bare feet. But I knew this idyllic peace couldn't last. A man like Leo, a man with his grandfather's hands, couldn't live on charity, no matter how well-intentioned. He needed the dignity of work. I found him one morning down by the old maintenance shed, a place that had been largely neglected for years. He had taken it upon himself to clean it out. Arthur's old tools, rusted from decades of disuse, were laid out on a clean rag. He had a small engine from a defunct leaf blower taken apart on a workbench and was patiently cleaning each piece. He was humming that same wordless tune I'd heard him sing to Lily. "That tune," I said from the doorway. He looked up startled. "Your grandfather used to hum that when he was concentrating on blueprints." A flicker of something, surprise, connection, passed over his face. "I don't know where I learned it," he said, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. He looked around the shed at the work he had done. "I have to do something, Eleanor. I'm going crazy. I need to pull my own weight. I need to provide for my daughter." This was the moment. The first test. I could have brought him into the company, given him a title and a salary that would have solved all his problems on paper. But it would have made him a dependent, a charity case in a suit. It would have been Robert's way, not Arthur's. "I have a proposition," I said. "Our head groundskeeper, a man who has been with us for 40 years, is retiring at the end of the month. The job comes with a modest salary, full health benefits for you and Lily, and use of the 2-bedroom groundskeeper's cottage by the west gate. It's hard work. It's dirty work. But it's honest work. It's yours if you want it. He looked at his own hands, calloused and stained with grease. Then he looked at me, and his eyes were clear and direct. When do I start? He asked. He moved into the cottage and poured himself into the job with a quiet, methodical intensity. He didn't just maintain the grounds, he transformed them. He brought the rose garden, which had been my pride and joy, back from the brink of decay. He repaired the crumbling stone wall by the pond with his own 2 hands. He was up at dawn and often worked until dusk. He was building something, earning his keep. He was happy. We were happy. But happiness, I have learned, can be a dangerous thing. Can make you forget that there are serpents in the garden. The call that shattered our peace came from a number I didn't recognize. An old family friend from our Seattle days. A notorious gossip. "Eleanor, darling, you will not believe what I heard," she chirped, her voice dripping with faux concern. "I ran into Cynthia Vance at the country club. Can you believe she still has a membership? And she was telling everyone the most tragic story. About how your grandson Leo had a complete mental breakdown and how you've taken him in. She said you're not quite well, and that you're keeping him and his poor child isolated. She said they're terribly worried, but you won't let them near him." The line went cold. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking with a white-hot rage. Robert and his wife weren't just watching from the sidelines. They were actively, maliciously rewriting our story, painting me as a senile old woman and Leo as an unstable charity case. They were laying the groundwork for something. 2 days later, I found out what it was. I was on the main patio watching Leo teach Lily how to stack blocks. The sun was warm, the birds were singing. It was a picture of perfect domestic peace. And then, a nondescript black sedan rolled up the driveway. It wasn't a guest. It wasn't a delivery. A woman in a severe gray business suit stepped out, holding a clipboard to her chest like a shield. She had the brisk, impersonal walk of a government official. She walked right up to me. "Are you Eleanor Vance?" she asked, not meeting my eyes. "I am." She flipped open a leather wallet, revealing a badge. "My name is Ms. Davis. I'm an investigative agent with the Arizona Department of Child Safety. We have received a credible, anonymous report alleging child endangerment and questioning the custodial fitness of your grandson, Leo Vance. I have a court order to conduct an immediate welfare inspection of the child, Lily Vance." The world tilted on its axis. The teacup I was holding slipped from my fingers and shattered on the stone, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet afternoon. Arizona. They had filed the report in the state where he had been homeless, ensuring it would be taken seriously. This wasn't just a threat. This was an executioner's axe, aimed directly at the heart of our new life. For a heartbeat, I was paralyzed. The words echoed in my head. Child endangerment. Custodial fitness. Vicious, legalistic terms designed to steal a child. My son, my own flesh and blood, was trying to have his granddaughter ripped from her father's arms and thrown into the foster care system. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. From across the lawn, I saw Leo stand up. He had heard. The color drained from his face, leaving him pale and gaunt, just as he had been that first night under the bridge. He scooped Lily into his arms instinctively, holding her like a shield. The look in his eyes was one of pure primal terror. This was his greatest fear. The one that had probably kept him awake at night even in this safe harbor. That's what snapped me out of it. His fear. I would not let my son do this to him. Not again. I turned back to Ms. Davis, my own fear transmuting into a cold, hard resolve. I met her impassive gaze. "You are on the wrong side of the state line, Ms. Davis," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "But I see you have a court order, so you must do your job. Please come in. You will find that the only thing my great-granddaughter is in danger of is being spoiled with love." I led her into the house. My mind was racing, formulating a strategy. Robert had laid a clever trap. He was using Leo's past, his poverty, his temporary homelessness as a weapon. He was counting on the system's inherent bias against a single, unemployed father with a spotty history. I didn't take her to the grand, intimidating rooms of the main house. I walked her across the manicured lawn, straight to the groundskeeper's cottage. Leo followed us, silent and ashen, clutching Lily so tightly she started to squirm. The cottage was Leo's fortress, and he had made it a home. It was small, but it was spotless. The scent of baby powder and clean laundry hung in the air. Children's books were stacked neatly on a small shelf. A half-finished puzzle was on the coffee table. Ms. Davis was a professional. Her eyes missed nothing. She noted the safety plugs in the electrical outlets, the baby gate at the top of the small staircase, the fresh food in the refrigerator. She began her questioning, her voice neutral, but the questions themselves were barbs. Mr. Vance, can you explain the circumstances under which you left Arizona with your daughter? When was the last time she was seen by a licensed pediatrician? Are you currently employed? Do you have any history of mental health issues or substance abuse? Each question was a landmine. Leo stumbled through his answers, his voice shaking. He was so terrified of saying the wrong thing that he was barely coherent. I stepped in. Ms. Davis, I said, my voice cutting through Leo's stammering. Perhaps I can provide some context. I handed her a file I had asked my lawyer to prepare the moment I knew Robert was sniffing around. It contained everything. A detailed report from Lily's Houston pediatrician, Dr. Peterson, outlining her complete recovery from pneumonia and her excellent current health. A letter from me, formally stating that Leo was employed as my estate's head groundskeeper, with a salary and full health benefits. And finally, a copy of my last will and testament, showing that a multi-million-dollar trust fund had been established for the care and education of my great-granddaughter Lily Vance. Ms. Davis took the file, her eyebrows rising slightly as she scanned the documents. I wasn't just showing her that Lily was cared for. I was showing her that we had the resources and the foresight to fight back. Hard. And as for the anonymous report, I continued, my eyes like ice, I can tell you with absolute certainty that it came from my estranged son, Robert Vance. He is a man who stole his father's life savings, an act which directly led to my husband's death from a heart attack. He is now attempting to use your agency to terrorize his own son, likely as leverage to contest his grandfather's will, and claim an inheritance he is not entitled to. I had laid all my cards on the table, the truth in all its ugly glory. Ms. Davis closed the file. She looked from the legal documents to the clean, safe home. She looked at Leo, who was now just holding his daughter, stroking her hair, his fear replaced by a quiet, fierce defiance. She looked at the happy, healthy little girl in his arms. Thank you for your time, Mrs. Vance, Mr. Vance, she said, her professional mask finally cracking to reveal a hint of human sympathy. It is abundantly clear that this report was malicious and unfounded. I will be recommending its immediate dismissal. Before she left, she paused at the door and handed me her card. If you receive any further harassment from the reporting party, she said, her voice low, you call me directly. The moment the door closed, Leo sank onto his small sofa, the fight draining out of him. He buried his face in his daughter's soft curls. I put my hand on his shoulder. We had stared into the abyss and we had won. But the victory was bitter. It had shown us the face of our enemy, and it had forged us into an alliance, bound by love and a shared righteous anger. The aftermath of the CPS visit was a quiet storm. The immediate terror had passed, but it left behind a landscape of grim understanding. That night, after Lily was tucked into her crib, Leo walked over to the main house. The hesitancy was gone. His steps were firm, his jaw was set. He found me in the study, where I was on the phone with my lawyer, initiating the process of formally disinheriting my son. He will not get another dime, Eleanor, Leo said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. But that's not enough. I don't want to just hide here behind your lawyers and your money. I want to build. I want to earn. I want to become a man that Robert can't touch, a man my grandfather would have recognized. I hung up the phone. This was the moment the tide truly turned. All right, Leo, I said. But it won't be easy. You will start at the very bottom. No one at the company will know who you are. You will earn every single step. Are you prepared for that? I've lived under a bridge, he said with a humorless smile. I think I can handle an office. His first day at Vance Legacy Homes, he wasn't given an office. He was given a cubicle in the windowless basement, in the customer relations department. His job was to wear a headset and answer the phone. For 8 hours a day, he was the voice of the company, the first line of defense against every angry, frustrated, and disappointed homeowner. He listened to complaints about leaky roofs in new constructions, about shoddy paint jobs, about property lines being disputed. It was a soul-crushing job designed to weed out the weak. But Leo didn't break. He listened. He took meticulous notes. He learned. He started to see patterns. He realized that the same complaints about leaky windows came from 3 different subdivisions, all of which used the same subcontractor. He wrote a detailed report, not complaining, but outlining the financial impact of the warranty repairs and suggesting a different supplier. He gave it to his supervisor, who dismissed it. So Leo quietly sent it to the head of construction. A month later, the company terminated its contract with the faulty supplier, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars. No one knew it was because of the quiet guy in the basement. After a year of that, I had him transferred. Not to a corner office but to a construction trailer. He became the personal assistant to Martin Reeves, our most notoriously difficult senior project manager. Martin was a Vietnam vet with a temper as fiery as the Texas sun and zero tolerance for nonsense. He saw Leo, with his quiet demeanor and lack of experience, and decided to break him. He had Leo on site at 5 a.m. rain or shine. He had him fetching coffee, reviewing blueprints he didn't understand, and dealing with angry union reps. One day, a shipment of custom-ordered trusses for a multi-million-dollar home arrived, and they were the wrong size. It was a catastrophic error that would set the project back by weeks and cost a fortune. Martin started screaming, his face purple with rage, blaming everyone. While Martin was yelling, Leo got on the phone. He didn't yell. He just talked. He called the supplier. He called the architect. He called a local engineering firm. By the time Martin had finished his tirade, Leo had a solution. A local firm could retrofit the trusses on site. It would cost extra, but it would only set them back 3 days, not 3 weeks. Martin just stared at him. "How do you do that, kid?" he grumbled. "I listened," Leo said simply. From that day on, Martin Reeves became Leo's fiercest advocate. He taught Leo everything he knew about construction, about managing crews, about negotiating with contractors. Leo soaked it all up. He spent 2 years as Martin's right-hand man, earning the respect of the tough, grizzled men on the construction sites. They called him the professor because he was always reading, always learning. Finally, it was time. I moved him into the sales division. He started as a junior agent, holding open houses on weekends and handing out brochures. His colleagues, flashy salesmen with expensive suits and practiced smiles, initially dismissed him. They went for the quick, high-commission sales, pushing clients into homes that were too big, too expensive. Leo did things differently. I made a point of secretly observing him one Saturday. A young couple, both teachers, came into an open house. They were clearly discouraged. They had a new baby and a tight budget. They'd been outbid on 3 other houses. The other agent would have shown them the brochure and talked about the granite countertops. Leo sat them down at the kitchen table. "Let's forget about houses for a minute," he said, putting the glossy brochures aside. "Tell me about your life. Tell me about your commute to the schools you teach at. Tell me where you buy your groceries. Tell me about your ideal Sunday afternoon." The couple was taken aback. For an hour they just talked. They told him about how they loved to take walks, but their current neighborhood had no sidewalks. They told him about how the wife's mother visited often and had to sleep on the sofa. They told him their dream was a small vegetable garden. Leo listened. He didn't try to sell them that house. Instead, he pulled out a map. He pointed to a different neighborhood, one with older, smaller, more modest homes. "The houses here are under your budget," he explained. "They were built by the company's founder 30 years ago. They're solid. The neighborhood has excellent schools, wide sidewalks, and larger yards." He ended up finding them a home that had been on the market for months because it had an outdated kitchen. But it had a perfect guest room for the mother-in-law and a sunny backyard ideal for a garden. He even connected them with a reliable contractor who could renovate the kitchen for a fraction of what they had saved on the home price. He made a tiny commission. But 3 months later, a Christmas card arrived at the office. It was from the teacher couple. The picture on the front showed them, their baby, and the grandmother all beaming on the porch of their new home. A small, thriving vegetable garden was visible in the background. Leo pinned that card to the wall of his cubicle. Word started to spread. Clients began asking for the young agent who actually listens. His sales numbers grew steadily, not from huge luxury sales, but from a volume of happy, loyal families. After 5 years, he wasn't just an agent. He was a senior project manager, in charge of his own developments. He championed projects that other managers avoided. Infill projects in overlooked neighborhoods, communities of smaller, high-quality homes for first-time buyers. And every single one of them was a resounding success. He had started in the basement, a ghost with no name. Now, he was one of the pillars of the company. He had earned it every single bitter, beautiful step of the way. And I knew with a certainty that filled my old heart with pride, that he was ready. The annual executive meeting at Vance Legacy Homes was a tradition steeped in formality. It was held in the top-floor boardroom, a magnificent room with a single massive mahogany table that could seat 30. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city of Houston sprawled below, a testament to the growth and power of the company Arthur and I had started in a dusty little office. Every vice president, division head, and senior manager was present. They were for the most part good men. Competent, ambitious, driven by profits and projections. They filed in, taking their seats, their expensive suits a uniform of corporate success. They all thought they knew the agenda. A review of the fourth quarter, projections for the new year, and then the main event. The announcement of my successor. Leo arrived and took a seat midway down the table, between the head of marketing and the VP of land acquisition. He was 33 years old, and he had earned his place at this table through 5 years of unrelenting work. He wore a simple gray suit that he'd bought himself. It wasn't flashy, but it fit perfectly. He looked comfortable in his own skin, confident but not arrogant. He opened his portfolio and took out a pen, ready to take notes like everyone else. He had no idea his life was about to change. When I entered, the room fell silent. I walked to the head of the table, to the large leather chair that had been Arthur's. But I didn't sit down. I stood behind it, my hands resting on its worn back. I let my gaze travel around the table, meeting the eyes of each person there. I saw curiosity, respect, and in the eyes of the 3 executive VPs, a barely concealed, hungry ambition. Each one of them believed the prize was theirs. "Good morning," I began. My voice, though aged, was steady and carried to every corner of the room. 35 years ago, my husband, Arthur Vance, stood before a much smaller group of people and said something that has been the guiding principle of this company ever since. He said, "We are not in the business of building houses. We are in the business of building communities. We are not selling lumber and drywall. We are selling the foundation for a family's future." I paused, letting Arthur's words hang in the air. For the 30 years I have run this company since his passing, I have tried to honor that principle. But the time has come for me to step down. The time has come for a new leader with a new vision, but one who is rooted in that same fundamental truth. The air crackled with anticipation. The VPs sat up straighter. I have spent the last 5 years searching for that leader. I continued, my voice resonating with emotion. Not just an executive who can maximize shareholder value, but a builder who understands the human value of our work. I was not looking for the smartest businessman. I was looking for the person with the most integrity, the most empathy, and the deepest understanding of what a home truly means. My gaze slowly panned across the ambitious faces, and then I let it come to rest on Leo. He was watching me intently, a puzzled frown on his face. He thought I was just giving my retirement speech. The entire room turned, following my line of sight. A wave of confusion rippled through the executives. "I have found that person," I said, my voice ringing with conviction. He did not start in this boardroom. He started in our basement answering phones. He has walked our muddiest construction sites. He has sat at the kitchen tables of our customers. He has earned the respect of every person he has worked with, not because of his name, but because of his character. Leo's jaw dropped slightly. His eyes widened in stunned disbelief. Effective immediately, I announced, my voice filling the silent room, "The new Chief Executive Officer of Vance Legacy Homes is my grandson, Mr. Leo Vance." A collective gasp went through the room. It was an absolute bombshell. For a full 10 seconds, there was nothing but stunned silence. Then a slow murmur started. But it wasn't one of anger. I saw the head of construction, Martin Reeves's successor, nod slowly. I saw the head of sales smile. They knew him. They had seen his work. They respected him. It was an unconventional choice, but it was a good one. Leo, I said, my voice softening as I gestured to the empty chair at the head of the table. Would you care to say a few words? As the news alert from the Houston Business Journal lit up the phones of everyone in the room, I felt a chill. The past, I knew, had a nasty habit of showing up uninvited, and it was about to come knocking on our door. The corporate world moves at the speed of light. Within an hour, the news of Leo's appointment was the talk of the Houston business community. A young unknown project manager elevated to CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. It was a fairy tale. And like all fairy tales, it attracted monsters. It took them 2 days to get their act together and fly down from Seattle. 2 days for the news to reach them, for their greed and entitlement to fester into a plan of action. I was in my old office, helping Leo get acquainted with the immense responsibilities that had just landed on his shoulders, when the call came. Margaret's voice on the intercom was strained, tight with a stress I had never heard before. Mrs. Vance, there is a situation in the main lobby. A Mr. and Mrs. Robert Vance are here. They are demanding to see the CEO. Security is with them, but they are causing a significant disturbance. Leo went rigid. He stood up, a protective, angry fire flashing in his eyes. I'll handle it, he said, his voice low. No, I said, standing up as well. I placed a hand on his arm. You will not. You are the CEO of this company now. You will not be dragged into a screaming match in the lobby. This is not your battle. It has always been mine. I looked him in the eye. I will handle my son. I took the express elevator down to the lobby. It's a grand 3-story atrium of glass and steel and polished marble, designed to project power and success. Right now it was the stage for a trashy, desperate soap opera. Robert stood in the center of the lobby, his face red and puffy, jabbing his finger at the chest of the head of security. He was shouting, his voice echoing off the marble. I don't think you understand. That is my son up there. I am his father. You will take me up to his office right now, or I will sue you and this whole damn company for kidnapping. He looked like a caricature of a wronged man. His suit, which had probably been expensive 5 years ago, was now too tight, the fabric shiny with wear. He reeked of desperation. Cynthia was playing a different, more insidious game. She stood near the reception desk, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue, speaking in a loud, trembling voice to a small, horrified-looking group of employees who were trying to get to the elevators. We're just so worried, she said, her voice catching theatrically. His grandmother, she's not well. She has always been controlling. She's poisoned him against us. We haven't seen our boy in years. We just want to make sure he's all right. They were a perfectly vile, coordinated team. He was the battering ram, she was the poison. They were trying to publicly humiliate Leo, to frame him as the puppet of a senile old woman, to delegitimize him before he even had a chance to lead. The click of my heels on the marble floor was sharp and loud. Click, click, click. The sound cut through Robert's ranting. He stopped mid-shout and turned. The moment he saw me, the blustering anger on his face collapsed, replaced by a flicker of something I hadn't seen in 30 years. The fear of a child who had been caught. Cynthia's crocodile tears dried up instantly, her face hardening into a mask of pure venom. Mother, Robert breathed. Don't you dare call me that, I said, my voice low and carrying in the sudden silence. I stopped a few feet from him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. You are not welcome here, Robert. You are trespassing. You can't keep me from my son, he blustered, trying to regain his footing. I have rights. The moment you left your son and his sick baby to fend for themselves under a freeway, you forfeited all your rights, I said, my words like chips of ice. I turned to the head of security. These people are creating a disturbance. Please escort them to the small conference room on the 3rd floor. I will deal with them there. As the guards moved to flank them, Robert looked at me, his eyes filled with a lifetime of resentment. This isn't over, old woman, he hissed. Oh, Robert, I replied with a tired, sad smile. You have no idea how right you are. The reunion was not going to be a happy one. In fact, it was going to be the end. The conference room on the third floor was deliberately chosen. It was small, windowless, and soundproof. It was a box. I had them escorted there and let them sit and stew in the silent, fluorescent-lit room for a full 15 minutes. Long enough for their adrenaline to fade, leaving behind only their raw, impotent greed. When I finally entered, I closed the door behind me, the heavy wood clicking shut with a sound of finality. I didn't sit. I stood at the head of the small table, my briefcase in my hand. They were seated opposite me, a pathetic pair of aging grifters. Robert, ever the one to believe in his own charm, tried to take control. "Mother, let's be reasonable," he started, his voice oozing a false sincerity that used to work on his father. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding. We were just worried. We heard the news about Leo's promotion. You heard about the money." I cut him off, my voice flat. "Let's not insult each other with lies, Robert. We are long past that." Cynthia, bristling, jumped to his defense. "How dare you? We are his parents. We have a right to be part of his life, to share in his success. We're family." I actually laughed. It was a cold, mirthless sound that echoed in the small room. "Family?" I repeated the word as if it were a foreign object in my mouth. "That's a very interesting word for you to use." I placed my briefcase on the table and leaned forward, my hands flat on the polished surface. I looked directly at Cynthia. "Was it family that made you tell your son his grandmother was dead? Was it family that made you hang up the phone on him when he was begging for a place to sleep?" Then I turned my full attention to my son. "Was it family, Robert, that made you drain your father's bank accounts and leave him to die with the shock of your betrayal?" He clutched his chest in the very chair you used to sit in as a boy, telling him your dreams. "You didn't just break his heart, Robert. You stopped it." He had the grace to look away, a faint flush creeping up his neck. "That wasn't my fault. Wasn't it?" I pressed on, my voice relentless. "And was it family that made you, just last year, make an anonymous call to Child Protective Services? Did you feel like a good father when you told a stranger that your son was unstable, that your granddaughter was in danger, hoping they would take her from him and put her in foster care? Tell me, what part of that is family?" The color drained from their faces. They looked at each other, their eyes wide with shock. They had thought their cowardly attack was untraceable. That's a lie," Cynthia sputtered. "Is it?" I opened my briefcase. I took out a single sheet of paper and slid it across the table. It was a sworn affidavit from Ms. Davis, the CPS agent, detailing the malicious and unfounded nature of the report, and stating that the call had been traced to a burner phone purchased at a gas station 10 miles from their home in Seattle. They were caught. Utterly and completely. Robert finally broke. "What do you want?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Money? Is that it? You want to buy us off?" "I want you gone," I said, my voice dropping to an icy whisper. I reached back into my briefcase and took out a thick leather-bound document. I dropped it on the table. The thud was loud in the silence. "This document, drafted by my legal team, is a restraining order. It legally prohibits both of you from coming within 500 feet of myself, Leo Vance, or Lily Vance. It bars you from contacting us in any way: phone, email, mail, or through third parties. It also permanently bans you from setting foot on any property owned by Vance Legacy Homes." "You can't do that," Robert shrieked, his voice cracking. "He's my son. A judge will never sign off on that." "Oh, I think he will," I said calmly. I reached into my briefcase one last time and pulled out a second, thinner folder. I didn't drop this one. I placed it gently on the table. Especially when presented with this. I opened the folder. Inside were not just allegations but proof. Printouts of emails I had obtained through my investigator, with key phrases highlighted in yellow. Bank statements showing transfers to offshore shell corporations. Sworn statements from 2 of their victims. "This," I said, my voice precise and sharp, "is a detailed file on the small investment firm you've been running for the past 2 years. The one where you use the Vance name to lure elderly people into investing their life savings into non-existent real estate developments. It's called wire fraud, Robert. It's a federal offense. The statute of limitations on what you did to your father has passed. But the clock on this is very much ticking." I pushed a pen across the table. "You have 2 choices. You can sign the restraining order, walk out of this building, and disappear from our lives forever. If you do, this folder goes into my personal safe and never sees the light of day. Or you can refuse. And I will personally walk this folder over to the U.S. Attorney's office this afternoon, and you will spend what's left of your miserable lives in a federal prison. Checkmate. Robert stared at the evidence of his crimes, his face a mask of utter defeat. All the bluster, all the entitlement had evaporated. He was just a small, pathetic criminal who had finally been cornered. With a trembling hand he picked up the pen and signed. Cynthia, her face twisted with hate, did the same. As he pushed the document back towards me, he looked at me one last time, his eyes hollow. "Are you proud of this, Mother?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Destroying your own son?" I looked at the man who had my husband's jawline and none of his character. "I am not destroying you, Robert," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "I am simply showing you the consequences of your own choices. You destroyed yourself 30 years ago. I'm just closing the book." I stood there for a long time after the security guards had escorted them out, listening to their footsteps fade down the hall. The signed restraining order lay on the table, the ink still fresh. It wasn't a trophy. It was a treaty ending a 30-year war. I felt no joy, only a vast hollow relief. The ghost that had haunted my life for so long had finally been exorcised. The door opened softly. Leo stood there, his face etched with a dozen unasked questions. He had clearly been waiting, respecting my wish for him to stay away, but needing to know. He walked into the room and saw the documents on the table. He saw the look on my face. He didn't ask what happened. He just came over, and to my complete surprise, he wrapped his arms around me. I am not a woman who is easily touched, but I leaned into his embrace. He was so tall, so strong. He was the man his grandfather should have had the chance to know. "It's over," I whispered into his shoulder. "I know," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Eleanor, for everything. You protected me. You protected our family. Our family." The words were a balm on a 3-decade-old wound. That was a year ago. Feels like a lifetime. Today my old office is a playroom. I sit in my comfortable chair, but instead of reviewing financial reports, I'm watching my great-granddaughter Lily build a tower of blocks on the floor. She is a bright, fearless 6-year-old, with her father's kind eyes and her great-grandfather's stubborn determination. Leo stands at the big window looking out over the city. He is not the boy I found under the bridge. He is a leader, a man of quiet strength and deep integrity. He has transformed Vance Legacy Homes. He's launched an initiative to build high-quality, affordable housing for veterans and first-time homebuyers. He calls it the Arthur Vance Founders Project. I sold the cold, sterile penthouse and moved back into the estate. But it's no longer a silent, echoing mausoleum. It's a home. It's filled with the sounds of Lily's laughter, the smell of Leo's terrible attempts at baking cookies, and the comfortable, easy rhythm of 3 generations living under one roof. We are not a perfect family. We are a family forged in crisis, bound by shared loss and a fierce protective love. We are survivors. My son, Robert, and his wife disappeared after that day. I don't know where they are and I don't care. They are a closed chapter in a book I have finally put back on the shelf. For 30 years I was defined by my grief and my anger. I was the widow, the betrayed mother. Now I am just Eleanor, a great-grandmother who gets to read bedtime stories every night. A mentor to a CEO I admire more than anyone. A woman who, at 78 years old, has finally found her way back home. Thank you for letting me share my journey with you. It hasn't been an easy story to tell, but it's one that needed to be spoken aloud. I know that betrayal by those we love most is a pain that many of you know all too well. So I want to ask you, have you ever had to make that impossible choice to cut a toxic family member from your life in order to save yourself or the ones you love? Please, share your experience in the comments below. Your story of survival could be the beacon of hope that someone else desperately needs to see today. And if my story resonated with you, please give this video a like and subscribe for more stories about the resilience of the human heart.